Hello and welcome to another Pauper video. Today we're playing Poison Storm. Poison Proliferate may be the correct term for the deck, but this is the deck that I went 4-0 when split the finals in the last video that we saw, and I haven't touched it since then. I actually picked it back up to try another league. Someone asked me to record it again, and we ended up getting a 5-0 on video. Yet, I accidentally blew away the video. So here, what we're going to do is go over the replays, just like that last time, and talk about it, see if we made any mistakes, and try to go pretty in-depth there. So, what are the changes from the previous list? Well, it mostly comes down to this card, Serrated Arrows. Serrated Arrows says, enters a battlefield with 3 arrowhead counters on it, tap to remove a counter and put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. I felt like this was worth testing because a very good player, Gudo Commit, told me that he was having success with it. It also helps with our matchup versus fairies in Game 1 and Game 2. And I realized during the league that what's actually very good is that you can proliferate the -1/-1 counter. So you put a -1/-1 on a 2/2, and you at end step, you untap, you put a -1 on another 2/2, and then you just proliferate once and they're both gone. I like that a lot. So given that this is very good versus fairies, I'm playing 2 in the main deck. I ended up cutting 1 Thirsting Roots and 1 Prologue to Phyresis as well for upping the count of my interactive spells. So I moved the Breath Weapon to the sideboard. So I have 2 Serrated Arrows, and I'm going up to 19 lands here with another island. So if you're not familiar with the deck, basically we're giving our opponent poison with Prologue to Phyresis, which gives each opponent a poison counter, and Infectious Inquiry, which does the same thing, but you get to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. And then after we have a poison counter, we go ahead and proliferate with Thirsting Roots, Contentious Plan, Experimental Augury, and our big proliferate, which is Vivid Surgeon's Insight, which is draw 3 cards and proliferate. So Contentious Plan draws 1 card. Experimental Augury is a anticipate effect. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them in your hand, the rest on your bottom of your library in any order. And Thirsting Roots is either proliferate or search your library for a basic and put it in your hand after revealing it. So with all this proliferation, that makes our lands, our mana base, super good. Super duper good is what I meant to say. So Saprosan, Scary, Peatbog, and Hickory Woodlot are all depletion lands which enter with 2 depletion counters on them, and they tap for 2 mana. But they have to remove a depletion counter. If your depletion counters never go away, you have lands that always tap for 2 mana, which is huge, and we end up having tons and tons. So then we also have Pentad Prism, which is Sunburst, add charge counters per colored mana that you spent to cast it. So you want to spend 1 of 2 different colors of mana. And it comes in with 2 charge counters, and then you just continue proliferating on it, so it's like storing mana on the table. And then Everflowing Chalice, which is multi-kicker, and it enters the battlefield with a charge counter for every time it was kicked. So you usually want to play it for 2 mana, and then as you move through your gameplay, it's going to get bigger and bigger, adding tons and tons of mana. So what happens is these draw spells here end up becoming draw spells plus sort of mini rituals. They also keep our overpowered mana base online. Thirsting Roots can be a 1 mana ritual, sometimes even better than Dark Ritual, so it's really good. And we can proliferate, like I said, these arrows. So the other thing that we're doing in the deck is we're playing 4 Weather the Storms to just get out of range of any aggro. This specific list, we're playing 4 Weather Storm and 1 Teaching, so it's 5 effective copies of Weather Storm. In case we run into red, we're just going to spam Weather, Teachings for Weather again. And then this I think is going to be slightly weaker versus red because we don't have Breath Weapon in the main deck to clean up all the tokens. But Serrated Arrows can do some damage to them, and we're going to try to be a little bit faster. I found that the list is a little bit faster than previous ones because the extra Thirsting Roots really add a lot of proliferation. In the sideboard, 2 Breath Weapons to close the door against Swarm decks and against red. We'll definitely just swap it out for the Serrated Arrows against red decks. 4 Moments Peace for decks that are not specifically red that are aggro. So aggro decks that don't have like burn reach, basically. I'll bring it in against Blue Black Terror, Bogles, White Weenie, Heroic, stuff like that. Bring the Ending, I think, is probably the best counterspell that you can play in this specific deck because it says it's kind of like a mana leak, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2, and then if they have 3 or more poison counters, it's just counter target spell for 1 and a blue. This is really good versus things like Mole Drifter, Archaeomancer, the Initiative, Ponza spells. That's why I like it. And then we have 4 Inside Out here, specifically for Walls, because Walls is a non-combat win condition that's also infinite, so your Weather the Storms don't do anything, and we need to be able to get out ahead of them, so we want our 2-for-1s here. So this turns their 0x into an x0, which kills it, plus it allows you to draw a card, so that 2-for-1 is huge. And then we'll do counters and inside outs against them. And then 1 more serrated arrows for our fairies opponents. So that is the deck. I have a primer of it on the Patreon, and then I'll update the sideboard guide for this specific list, and we will see you in the matches. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you there. Okay, round 1, we are versus Talradach. And I thought last time that I faced them that they're on red, so I feel like this is a good hand. We have 2 different colors of mana plus the Pentad Prism. Then we can Thirsting Roots to add extra colored sources. We can just cast Prologue off of these, and then Thirsting Roots to get the mana back. We have Vivid Surgeon's Insight to refill Huge and Weather the Storm, so I feel like this is a good hand. We just play out the Woodlot and pass. They lead on Great Furnace into Coldotha Rebirth, which makes me think that this is a very aggressive mono red player, but since they spam, they like abuse their mana to get speed, I feel like we're in a good position after playing out the Woodlot. Okay, so here we draw the Scary. We can just play out the Scary, pass the turn. They go ahead and attack us, play a Rustvale Bridge. So now I know that they're actually Boros, so it's like the Boros Batterfist deck, which I'm making me a lot more confident here because I don't feel scared playing against that as much, although that is a kind of a fast deck as well. So we're going to play our Peat Bog first before we do anything. We play the Pentad Prism, we Prologue, and I probably could have just Thirsting Roots there, but I guess I didn't really feel like it was necessary. But I think in reality, yeah, I don't think there was any reason to not Thirsting Roots there. It would have given them an extra poison counter and made sure that our lands were proliferated. If they had a Smash to Dust on their turn, we would have been pretty hosed. So now we're just going to play the Woodlot, play Thirsting Roots, play Vivid Surgeon's Insight. Okay, there we go. Thirsting Roots adds a bunch of mana to our cards. Okay, then we Vivid Surgeon's Insight and Weather the Storm. So I decided here Weather the Storm was good. I didn't think they had a lot of power, and I just wanted to like buy a bunch of turns, feeling like I would draw into another Weather the Storm. And they add a Thraben Inspector and a Makeshift Munitions to the table. So here we're going for Vivid Surgeon's Insight to draw, looking for another Weather the Storm. We didn't find it. We're going to Inquiry, and then Deep Analysis. We end up drawing into Double Chalice. So we have Double Chalice plus Inquiry. So we're going to discard some lands. They're getting in for a bunch. Puts us to 11. So here the issue is, if they have the Rally the Peasants, we are dead on their turn. They have 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They actually have 11 damage on the table anyway. So we have to draw into Weather the Storm to stay alive. So all I'm going to do here is draw as much as possible. Try not to put myself dead to like Gallblast plus Makeshift Munitions, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to lead on Deep Analysis. We draw into Contentious Plan. So here we have a bunch of mana, so we're going to Chalice, and the Prism, and then Contentious Plan. So Contentious Plan is going to be 2 mana, and then add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. So it's basically Cabal Ritual plus draw a card. I love that. Chalice into Chalice again, into Contentious Plan, draw a card. Unfortunately, we can't use the mana from the tapped Chalice this turn. So we're trying to use as much as mana as possible without actually spending the Chalice mana, or do as much as possible without spending the Chalice mana. So we tap one at a time. We whiff on the Weather Storm, so now this is the final moment to draw into it. Cast Deep Analysis, and we find the Weather, so got lucky. Cast the Weather, go up to a lot. We just cast the Everflowing Chalice for 0 for Storm, and then play out the Weather Storm. I'm at 6 life. I'm hoping they don't have it. They don't have it, and we go to 33. So our opponent's going to swing in. Now I'm not as concerned. We have Teachings, and they're at 7 poison already, so we can just start drawing cards. Draw cards off the Deep Analysis. We draw blanks. Deep Analysis again. So we draw Infectious Inquiry, and we play out the Pentad Prism. Infectious Inquiry is going to put them to 8, and then I can start Teachingsing for poison if I want. After the Infectious Inquiry, we draw Phyresis. So we could just take it slow and play Phyresis into Weather again, if we want to. I'm going to Phyresis, and I draw the Augury anyway, so that puts them dead. Yay! It's funny that the replays are just showing me adding all my mana, and they're dead. So post board, we're in the ending stay. We are pulling in the 2 breath weapons for the 2 serrated arrows, not bringing in the Moment's Peace or the Inside Out. So this is just a swap here, breath weapon for serrated arrows. So our first hand was a mulligan. We only had 1 land and it was not blue. And this hand I think is good enough, so I think we just bottom the woodlot, pass the turn. Okay, they play a tap land. We're going to lead on the peat bogs, or we'll play the woodlot out. So the plan now is to either go Chalice plus Proliferate, probably just go peat bog, and then go to the next turn, and looking to Infectious Inquiry, Chalice, and Thirsting Roots all in the same turn. Drawing a Pentad Prism, which is one of the best cards in our deck, so we're good with that. And our opponent led on tap land into Great Furnace, into Core Skyfisher, pick up the Great Furnace. So they're going super aggro, and we have Weather Storm in hand, and I'm pretty happy that they're taking this plan instead of going like on a more like controlling kill your artifacts type way. Play the Core Skyfisher, picking up a land. So it's 4 damage, but not too scary in reality. We play Chalice into the Pentad Prism, and then I thought I could like Inquiry into Thirsting Roots, but I really only have 4 mana here, which would put me to 0 on the Pentad Prism. So we're going to go Thirsting Roots into Inquiry. Thirsting Roots adds a bunch of mana. It's going to add to here and here and here and here, but we miss on the proliferation on our opponent. There's the mana on them. We just go ahead and blast off an Inquiry, pass the turn. Our opponent revokes the Chalice, which is probably an okay decision. I think I would have revoked the Pentad Prism, but it doesn't matter either way. We still have the Pentad Prism in play, so we can cast a Breath Weapon when we want to. And we top deck a Pentad Prism, so we can play that and then cast Insight. And here we draw into Thirsting Roots, plus Contentious Plan, plus Inquiry, Weather. Feels really good. And we can use Thirsting Roots to get +1 mana to cast Contentious Plan for free and then into Weather Storm, so we can gain a bunch of life. There's the Thirsting Roots into Contentious Plan, puts them to 4 poison, and now we have enough mana to just cast Weather Storm. We end up drawing the Everflowing Chalice, so here we can use 2 of the counters, cast the Everflowing Chalice, and use the last counter from, not the last total counter, but use one of the counters from the one that still has 2 on it to cast Weather Storm. So it'll be Storm, gaining us 18 life. There's the 18 life, and we get to pass the turn. So we're now at 30. They only have 4 power on the table. They play a Makeshift Munitions. and a Glinthawk. We can clean up Glinthawks with the Breath Weapon, so I'm not too afraid. They pick that up. So I was pretty confident with the 4 damage a turn, but now they're going to have 6 damage a turn, so it's increasing rapidly. So here we're just going to cast the Infectious Inquiry. Okay, Inquiry. We draw into Insight plus Chalice. We cannot currently cast the Insight with the mana that we have, so I'm going for Chalice, leave up Weather Storm in case they have something crazy happen. And they go Munitions, they flip a Wellspring, they play Glinthawk. So now I'm looking at the Breath Weapon saying, okay, this cleans up 2 Glinthawks. Kind of want to play it. 8 damage a turn would put them on just a couple more turns clock to kill us. They're getting in, put us to 18. I'm a little bit worried that that red mana is representing a Pyroblast, but I think I have to just jam the Surgeon's Insight anyway. So we untap, gonna play the Scary out, and then Insight. And we want to try to Insight off of, like holding up the Weather Storm, and then Insight off of these lands maybe. Just trying to leave up the Chalices for later use. There's the land. We cast the Insight, leaving up the green mana. We are going to Proliferate a bunch. Then we can just cast the Everflowing Chalice off of the other Chalice. So it's -1 mana. But here I'm going to be taking 8 damage. And my plan now is to go Breath Weapon into Weather Storm. I think that's fine. Clears up 4 power, so it halves their power. Just go for it. We're going to gain 12. So it buys us a bunch of turns. They end up shooting us with one of the birds, and we weather the storm. Now on their turn, we're tapped out. They go Synthesizer into Glinthawk, pick up the Synth. Find a Kuldotha Rebirth and Kuldotha. So we ended up basically back where we started, which was unfortunate. I felt like I kind of burnt that Breath Weapon way too early. We untap. So they went and attacked us for 4 again. We're now at 25. We untap and find a blue land, or an island. Just going to play a Deep Analysis. See what happens. We're really looking for another proliferation spell so that we can get the Pentad Prisms back. Okay, so we cast Deep Analysis, tapping one of the chalices. We find Thirsting Roots. We can now add a bunch of mana back, and our Pentad Prisms are online. We just Deep Analysis again after that. Blam. See if we draw. We draw a Augury. Cast that into. So if you saw there, the options were Contentious Plan, or Weather the Storm. They're currently at 7 poison. This puts them to 8. So I felt like if I'm not going to die next turn, and I had potential to kill them on this turn, so I took the Contentious Plan. Although it looks like it's a pretty fast clock from them, so we don't get very many turns. I'm trying to just win as fast as possible. We cast a Contentious Plan, and we end up blanking, drawing a Sappers and Scary. So they're attacking us for 9 damage, which means that on the next turn, they are going to kill us. Which is sad, but we're going to untap, and we draw an Augury. So by drawing as many cards as possible, we put ourselves at the best possible to draw the out of the Augury. If we had played the Weather Storm, I think we would not have been able to get there because we would have drawn the Scary afterwards and then probably been dead. So here we just kill them with the Augury. So around 2 versus Frequenza, and they told me that they're a Patreon subscriber, which is really awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And here we go. They lead on Colony Garden, which means either Bogles or the black-green control deck. And we're keeping Peat Bog, Prism, Roots, because if we draw any, these are all very good, right? I felt like we can get a lot of Storm, we can Weather Storm versus red. We can also just use the roots off of like the Prism, but I felt like if we draw another mana, we'd be fine. Any other non-black mana would be like perfect. We play out a second Peat Bog. And then it turns out we don't draw another non-black mana. So we have to cast the Prism, and then we're going to use the one counter off the Prism to Thirsting Roots for an island, not getting Proliferation, and then cast the Experimental Augury looking for mana sources. Alright, let's go back in time. And then the mana source that we found was good, but alright, so we found Prism, Scary, and I think that with our hand, the Prism is worth way more than a Scary, because we're going to be able to get the green mana for it for Weather Storms, so we take the Prism. Can't cast it this turn, but that's fine. We still have not poisoned our opponent whatsoever. Although they are a slow deck, so it's fine. They play a Wellspring, a Deadly Dispute the Wellspring. We're a little bit worried about them slamming the Avenging Hunter. Play the Pentad Prism, we Experimental Augury, and we find an island. Play the island and pass. I could have blown the Prism to cast Insight, but I don't think that's useful. They're going to Reckoner's Bargain, and after attacking us, we finally find the Prologue, so we're just going to play that first. Find a Contentious Plan. So I think that the best play here is to just draw 3 off of the Vivisurgence. We draw 3, and we going to proliferate a little bit. So I realized here that I had 8 cards in hand. I was going to have to discard the hand size, but I hadn't made a land drop. So I used the Thirsting Roots once again to get a land. I'm just going to grab an island and play it and pass the turn. Don't think I need to Weather the Storm here, so we're good. So the next turn, we can play double Chalice and Prism, and then Insight or Contentious Plan or stuff, and make those Contentious Plans really, really good again. Our opponent's going to attack us for 4. They play Reckoner's Bargain and a Crypt Rats and a Blood Fountain. So we untap, we play the Pentad Prism into Chalice, and we can use the Chalice to cast another Chalice or just cast the Chalice. So we cast the second Chalice. That means that our Contentious Plan is going to add a bunch of mana. Contentious Plan using the Prism, leaving the Chalices untapped. Now each Chalice taps for 2, which means we can cast the Insight and still have mana left over for Weather the Storm. Bam, bam, blue, cast Insight, draw a bunch of cards, and then we can use one of the Prism counters to play Weather, gain 18, go to 28, and completely negating their clock. I did want to I had to Weather the Storm there because if they had a black land, they could have had 5 + 5 to kill us. They Deadly Dispute, and here they cast the Avenging Hunter and take the initiative, but I believe it's much too late. We still have Weather the Storm in hand to draw, and we have so much mana with our Chalices, and we're already going to be drawing 5 cards. I rip a Serrated Arrows, so what I'm doing here is just going to ping the Crypt Rats in a little bit. I still didn't understand at this point that you could proliferate the -1s. We kill the Crypt Rats, we Experimental Augury, finding a Prologue of the Phyresis, and now we have +5 cards in hand and also 3 poison. Trying to see if I can chain a bunch and Weather again. So we Prologue, finding an island, Inquiry, and we get Prologue, Prism. We can cast the Prism from, we're just going to, I started chaining and I was like, what am I doing? Oh, they're almost dead. Okay, we'll just win the game. Contentious Plan. GG. And then after selecting all of our things to proliferate onto, we win. So post board, you could consider bringing in the Moments piece here to just stall against them. But I think that they're slow enough that the only thing I care about is countering the Avenging Hunters. So I end up taking out Mystical Teachings, the 2 Serrated Arrows, and 1 Everflowing Chalice to just bring in all these counterspells to try to not get initiatived. Alright. So that's a mulligan, and we're going to keep this hand basically just making land drops and having to bring the ending. They play a Blood Fountain. We draw Infectious Inquiry, which was a really good draw, to be honest. They're going to Deadly Dispute, adding mana to the table, which means they're probably looking to play a 4 or 5 drop soon. We just Inquiry and pass. I was thinking I could hold up Bring the Endings pretty soon, and they cast Thorn of the Black Rose. So it's just 1 power, and wasn't super scared of it. And I really need to get this Pentad Prism into play. Since they use their mana, they can't cast the Avenging Hunter this turn, so what I'm going to do is cast the Pentad Prism, leaving 1 counter on it and passing the turn. Then next turn I can Contentious Plan and leave open to Bring the Ending. They play Nihil Spellbomb and attack, and we draw into an island. So we Proliferate. Now we have enough mana to cast the Bring the Endings, and we're just going to Contentious Plan again and play out the island and leaving up the counterspell. So our opponent will Reckoner's Bargain the Spellbomb, drawing a card. So they draw 3 here, go to 10, and they cast Deglamour on my Prism, but they have no more ways to do anything this turn, so I'm just going to counter that. I do need to keep the green sources around, so I'm countering it. Bring the Ending. They attack for 1. Now they have 8 cards in hand, making their card draw into just discard a card. They have 9 cards. They basically just have to keep discarding things. And we find an Everflowing Chalice. So we're going to Deep Analysis, play a land, leaving up to Bring the Ending for the Avenging Hunter still. They cast a Guildsworn Prowler and a Nihil Spellbomb. Another Prowler, so they have 5 power on the table. So soon we're going to want to Weather the Storm. Alright. No end step Augury because I can use the Augury to power up the Chalices. So we go land Chalice into Chalice using the Chalice, and then we use the last Chalice to cast the Experimental Augury. That's going to allow us to continue to hold up the Bring the Ending. We find Woodlot, Prism, and Inquiry. I'm just taking the Inquiry for more card draw, basically. Because next turn we're going to be drawing 4 cards if they don't crack the Relic. I felt like they were going to crack the Relic, so I needed to get the Inquiry to keep my chain going. They get in for 5, so we take it, obviously. And then they're going to Deadly Dispute the Spellbomb, so now we are still having our Deep Analysis in the graveyard, which is really good for us. They have 5 mana on the table, and they cast the Avenging Hunter, which I snap counter. Donk. Worth noting, they didn't have the mana to pay the tax, but here it's just straight up counterspell. They draw a card. Our turn. We draw into a Pentad Prism, which is nice. Usually I just put the Prism onto the battlefield first. Prism into Deep Analysis, into Prologue, into Inquiry, and we finally get a Proliferation spell, so we're going to do that ASAP. We proliferate all of our stuff. We're at 5, so we obviously need to Weather Storm. And I can't hold up anything else, so I'm just going to go double Weather. Bam, Weather Storm, Weather Storm. Go from 5 to 44. Zoop. Okay, we take 5, going to 39. They end up, if you saw there, we had Vivid Surgeon's Insight plus Deep Analysis in hand, which I was super excited about, but they end up duressing and taking my Vivid Surgeon's Insight. So I was pretty unhappy about that. That was like pretty important to me. They get rid of our graveyard to draw a card. Just trying to cycle, basically, looking for more threats. And we draw a Deep Analysis. So this is why I really love Deep Analysis plus Weatherstorm. Once you're at a high life total, this is 6 mana draw 4, which is huge. And we have all this mana to cast it with. So we're just going to, even though they got rid of our Vivid Surgeon's Insight, we can now draw 8 cards. Draw. Draw. So we have now 9 poison off these 2 Thirsting Roots. Draw some more, and we draw into the Augury, which will put them dead. We just proliferate into Augury. So you'll see how that goes. Usually I like to proliferate first. Doesn't really matter. And if you're in paper, you don't even have to add the counters. You can just cast the things and only put proliferate onto your opponent, since you know they're dead. Alright, round 3, let's go. Here we are in round 3 versus Thaumascura 9. So I felt like this was a pretty good hand. It doesn't have a depletion, but we have Chalice into Augury. So I like that a lot. Land go. They go Plains, Thraben Inspector. Generally, I'm pretty happy about that with this deck. Everflowing Chalice pass. We're looking to draw lands. They get in. Rafine's Informant, so we know this is White Weenie now. They discard the Lunarch Veteran. We find a Prologue, so I'm just casting that because... Oh no. Casting Experimental Augury looking for mana sources. We end up finding just Pentad Prism off of it, so now we're kind of in a not so great spot. Rafine's Informant, this is a bunch of power on the table. So right now they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So on our turn, if we pass the turn, we're dead to the +2/+2 spell. So I think I'm not playing optimally here, but I think the correct play would have been to cast Pentad Prism for 1 counter using the Everflowing Chalice and then cast Experimental Augury. That would have left us with being tapped out with having a Pentad with 2 counters on it, right? So it doesn't really matter either way. Okay, so it looks like the play that I did was fine, where we cast a Pentad for 2, and then we cast Experimental Augury off the Chalice, and then we cast the Prologue. Finding another Augury. Do they have it? They don't have it this turn. We're still dead if we pass the turn, because now they have 8 power in play. We have the Serrated Arrows, though. So we can Experimental Augury, give them another counter, and then play the Serrated Arrows. I opt to kill the Rafine's Informant, and then Thirsting Roots. Probably should have killed the... I still didn't understand the proliferating the -1s, so I should have just Serrated Arrows this one, and then proliferated to kill it. That would have put them to only 6 power on the table instead of 7. Alright, so I was kind of banking on them not having the Anthem still. They get in, and they have it, so we are dead. Bonk. So post board, we're just swapping 4 Moments Peace and cutting 1 Teachings, 1 Chalice, and 2 Serrated Arrows. We don't really need the Teachings post board because we have 8 ways to stall instead of just the 4 ways with the Weather Storms. So that's why I'm cutting the Teachings. Cut the Everflowing Chalice. It's like a pretty easy cut. Sometimes it's too much mana, like to have 4 of them. And then the 2 Serrated Arrows aren't really doing that much when we're just fogging them out. So here, this is a pretty good hand. We have turn 2 Inquiry, and then we can Contentious Plan and stuff. So we're just going to play out the Peat Bog and start passing, drawing cards, and getting it going. I like getting the Inquiry ASAP. Draw 2, we go up to 7 cards in hand. We find a Moment's Peace. And they have 4 power on the table already. That's fast. So we did not find a green source. I think we have to Augury here for green. We find a Prologue, Thirsting Roots, Vivisurgence. We just take the Prologue here. Oh, no, Augury. Take the Augury, pass the turn. Hoping to not see too much power enter the table. And they end up recommissioning their Militia Bugler, which I haven't seen that much, and they find a Core Skyfisher. Here we're going to play out the Chalice. Or we're just Experimental Augurying. We find the Woodlot, so now I feel a lot more confident. We get in for a bunch, putting us to 6. Thraben Inspector, so we're basically dead to anything. And the relic hitting the table is scary because our Moment's Peace needs to get flashback to get full value, but they're going to fog for a full turn. Or they're going to cut one of my fog turns off with the relic. Okay, we find an inquiry, so let's see what happens. We need to leave open the green source. Going to Contentious Plan first. Always drawing, using my blind draws before I use something like the Experimental Augury, which can actually be card selection. So we want to maximize the amount of cards in hand before we're using our card selection. This puts them to 4. We cast the Chalice and cast the Experimental Augury. Don't really know why I tapped the Chalice there. I thought maybe about using the Infectious Inquiry, I guess. So they're attacking for a bunch. We have the Fog. They are now threatening lethal because they can crack the relic. So we're looking for more Fogs or Weatherless Storms. We end up going Vivisector's Insight to draw 3. And then I look at my hand, and I've got 4 poison right here. They're at 6. So I'm just trying to consider whether I can actually win. So we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana, and this cost exactly 10 mana. So we just cast all the spells. Inquiry, cast Inquiry, go to 2, cast Prologue, you're dead. Alright, here we are in round 4, and we had to mulligan the first hand. The second hand is kind of a sketchy keep, even though we are going to not be super excited about it. The reason being we are able to play out the Scary, and then turn 2 we're going to Augury looking for a land. If we do find a land, then I think we'll be all set, but if we don't, we're kind of hosed. So let's just see what happens. We play the Scary out, our opponent leads on Island, so Island is pretty scary for me, no pun intended. It's that basically if they Spell Pierce my Augury, then I'm just totally SOL, and I rip the Hickory Woodlot, so now we're super good. We just play that out and pass the turn. We can end step the Augury if we want to, or we can just wait, see what they do. I saw them just passing, and I thought that they weren't going to do anything, but they play an Augur Boros. So here I'm like, that doesn't really look like mono blue to me. Maybe it could still be mono blue, could be like mono blue Terror. We'll see. They reveal a Brainstorm, so we're not really sure yet. And we have free reign to cast the Pentad Prism into the Augury. Pentad Prism, Augury looking for a land. We find a Peat Bog. We get to play that out. And then we're going to Prologue just to get their poison on them ASAP. Draw the Serrated Arrows, and I think that I'm still thinking that it could be some sort of Fey deck, so I'm interested in playing that out. And here, I think I make a mistake. I'm going to play out the Serrated Arrows, but I probably should have just gone for the Contentious Plan first to see if they want to counterspell the Contentious Plan, because if they do, then I really need to draw cards, and I would like to play out the Deep Analysis maybe, or I could Infectious Inquiry to draw cards and Contentious Plan, but here I'm just trying to prioritize getting the Serrated Arrows in play in case they're fairies, and then I was afraid of a Spell Pierce, so I didn't play the Contentious Plan. They Brainstorm and find nothing, get in for 1, and play an Island, I believe. No, they just pass. So they're going to discard to hand size, and then discarding a Scred. So I'm like, okay, this is definitely blue red fairies. I'm just hoping they don't have straight up counterspell, play Contentious Plan, and they have the counterspell. So now my mana is really, really bad. I'm pretty nervous here. We have to just sit and play draw go for a while until I can find a way to proliferate or get some more mana into play. They Brainstorm and attack with the Augur, so they just have nothing going on. Still don't know what kind of fairy deck they are. We play the Sappers and Scary. Pass the turn. That was a really, really good rip for us. And they invoke a Moldrifter, which is like, what? I had no idea that was going to happen. So it's not fairies. It's some sort of Jeskai Ephemerate deck. And they don't have any bridges in play and any other colored sources. Weird. So we're going to Deep Analysis looking for mana, and then I find a Pentad Prism and Deep Analysis. So I'll play out the Pentad, and I Deep Analysis from the graveyard, just trying to draw into Proliferation. They played another Augur Bolas, finding Cleansing Wildfire. Clearly it's Jeskai Ephemerate. I just ping their creature to stop them from attacking us. And play a land. Going to Infectious Inquiry. Did not play a land yet. So I waited to play a land in case I drew a depletion off the Inquiry. We have to just play an island out now. They find a Muldrifter. So the Muldrifter is going to draw them some cards here. Then they play another Augur Bolas. So they just have 3 Augurs in play. And it finds them a Preordain. They play Island and Preordain. We're going to get in for 1 again. This time I decided not to use the Serrated Arrows. We find a prologue and use that. And then I can just plan off that. And then I realized at this point that I can proliferate that -1/-1 counters, which was exciting. So I proliferate on the Augur Bolas and the Serrated Arrows. And then I'm going to Deep Analysis, drawing cards, and just now continue to buy my time. It was okay to blow the lands there since we had the Pentats in play. But I probably should not have played the Serrated Arrows here because they rip an Ephemerate and reset this Augur, which is a bummer for me. I go ahead and play a land and pass the turn. Here I'm going to discard the one of my copies of Weather the Storm just because I don't think that I need 2 copies to stay alive, but 1 I might be needing here. If they get a couple of bolts, then I'd be pretty close to dead. They ephemerate their other Augur Bolas, so now all my Serrated Arrows counters did not matter whatsoever. It's worth noting that Fiery Cannonade would not have helped here either. So this was kind of a wash. They Wildfire, we get an island back, play an Archaeomancer, so now I'm interested in Serrated Arrows plus Proliferate. We grab their counterspell back from the graveyard. They still have 7 cards in hand, so it's a scary position. I feel like I'm close to losing the game. We untap, double Chalice, so I'm just going to test the waters with a Chalice. They don't counter, so I play a second Chalice. I've got a lot of mana in play. I just prologue, and they don't counter that, so I'll just blow my Hickory Woodlot to cast Weather the Storm. They do have 4 power in play, and now I'm pretty safe from dying from them. Weather for a lot. Okay, they get in for 4. We're just gonna sit pretty. They smash to dust. So in response to the smash to dust, I'm gonna Serrated Arrows their Archaeomancer. Bye. So we're gonna untap, and we can play Pentat Prism, attempt to play Thirsting Roots. Our opponent's gonna counterspell that, which is unfortunate, but we can just hard cast the Deep Analysis here. And I don't want to blow the Prism, so I'm just gonna pass the turn. And our opponent is going to play Dawnbringer Cleric and get rid of my Deep Analysis, which was sad for me. I should have just blown the Prism. They get in for 3, and now we play another Deep Analysis, and another Deep Analysis. Or we're going to experiment with Augury first. Okay. So Augury first lets us have more mana in play. And we can also get rid of the Archaeomancer, assuming they don't have a counterspell. This does resolve, so we get to proliferate on the counterspell, I mean the Archaeomancer. Now we're going to cast Vivid Surgeons for draw 3, bunch more mana on our artifacts. We're going to proliferate again with the Thirsting Roots, putting them to 7. That's a nice dark ritual that is working for our plan. We draw 2, Contentious Plan, draw another one. We just go ahead and play the Chalice since we have extra mana. Play the Augury, finding an Infectious Inquiry, and then we cast the Infectious Inquiry, and they are dead. They just did not have any more counterspells in play, even though I had cast tons and tons and tons of counterspells that game. Okay, post board, we're bringing in the 4 Bring the Endings and a couple serrated arrows, taking out Thirsting Roots, Teachings, 2 Weather the Storms, and a Chalice. This is a pretty good hand since we have the turn 2 Prism plus Augury. They lead on a tap land, we lead on a tap land as well. Playing the Woodlot out. They play a blue land. Probably can't counterspell anything we have. Unless it's like a Fire Blast. So I'm going to test the waters here and play the Pentad Prism and just try to resolve the Prologue. Since we had the Prologue in play, when I get the counters on them as fast as possible, it means any proliferation that we resolve is going to work to our game plan, instead of just like setup. They cycle for an island. They're going to play nothing. Revoke Existence, the Prism. Okay, that stinks for sure. Play island, and probably should have just played the Pentad on 1. I was kind of nervous that they were going to have an Archaeomancer, so now I'm just like trying to play around the Archaeomancer constantly. By having to bring the ending up, I mean. We pass the turn. They go land go. We're going to land go again. They have 4 cards in hand, and we have 7 now. We have double Infectious Inquiry. We can cast that. They end up counterspelling, and I'm holding up to bring the ending once again. So they untap, they Wildfire themselves, so I'm just going to let that resolve. They go to 4. Augur Bolus, we'll let that resolve as well. They put a Smash Dust in their hand, so now I'm kind of nervous. I want to play out the Pentad Prism now that I have double Proliferate. I think I can just resolve at least one of them. I Contentious Plan and they don't respond. So now I'm going to Augury, finding another Contentious Plan. So I'll Contentious Plan one more time. Just poisoning them up. I draw land, and then I'm pretty happy about that. So now I'm just going to pass and see if I can just counter the Smash to Dust and then keep my Prism around. They Brainstorm. Smash to Dust. We're going to counter it. So then they're going to Brainstorm again. No, that's the first Brainstorm. Sorry, I had to rewind. They Brainstorm, Smash to Dust. We counter the Smash to Dust. They Brainstorm again. And now, I thought everything was cool, but they Smash to Dust again. We have 6 mana in play, so we can at least flash back a Deep Analysis, but we draw Inquiry. We can just go double Inquiry. Inquiry, Inquiry. So we draw some cards. We did not find any lands, but we still have all of our lands in play. And they get back the Counterspell with the Archaeomancer that they play. So here we can play a land, and then the Serrated Arrows. So I'm threatening to kill the Archaeomancer if they don't have an Ephemerate. They are going to get in. I just arrows the Archaeomancer before damage. They play another Archaeomancer. So this is actually a really good spot for me. They don't have any white mana for Ephemerate. They do pick up a Brainstorm. And I'm hoping that I can just kill both their Archaeomancers with the Proliferation. I'll untap, Proliferate. I just go ahead and counter that one. Let's cast Contentious Plan. That gets countered with the Pyroblast. So we try casting Augury. That gets countered with a Counterspell. They're down to 1 card in hand, though. We cast Experimental Augury. We find a land. I think it's better to have the land in play since we have so much card draw in hand. And we get rid of both their Archaeomancers. Play land. Your turn, opponent. I'm not sure they can come back from this, but we are still looking at the insight and saying, I don't know if this is going to resolve. They might have a Pyro. They Ephemerate, which is scary. They get no cards in hand. So here I'm thinking that I want to go for the arrows on the Augur Bolus and try to Proliferate to kill it. We go Vivisurge's Insight. And the reason I want to try to kill it here is that if their Ephemerate is left in exile, or yeah, if they have no creatures, then the Ephemerate will be left in exile on their upkeep instead of getting value off of it. So cast an Insight, and we end up forgetting to Proliferate. So we Proliferate onto everything but the Augur Bolus on accident. And then I go to cast the arrows, but I realize that I have no reason to, so I just cast the Prologue to Phraeresis to put them to 9 counters. So now any proliferation or poison will win the game. They end up getting to resolve their Ephemerate, which was not my plan. And they find a red elemental blast, which is even worse for my plan. So we're going to just draw raw cards with the deep analyses. After serrated arrowsing, play the deep analysis, they red blast it, another deep analysis, red blast that as well. So now I just leave up Bring the Ending for an Archaeomancer or Muldrifter. I'll just arrows that before they attack and untap here. So let's see if we can resolve this Vivisurgeon's Insight. We cast it, we've got one counterspell to protect it with. Insight. And they have a counterspell, and we have Bring the Ending. Do they have a counterspell? They do not, so we win the game. Alright, so now we're facing Regita, who is a Familiars player, and we don't have blue mana in game 1. We're going to just go ahead and mulligan that. This is a pretty good hand if we can just resolve our Contentious Plan early. We could always Experimental Augury on their end step. We play the Scary out and pass, and then they end up tapping out, playing the Chancery. So we're going to Augury, looking for a bounce, for a Depletion land, basically. So we could play the Depletion land this turn, but we find the Pentad Prism. So I put my counters back on my Scary and play Forest and pass a turn. They tap out for a Seagate Oracle. That means we can go Pentad Prism into Contentious Plan, draw a card. And we find a land, luckily, play the land and pass a turn. They play Familiar, gets in for 1, evokes a Muldrifter. So since they tapped out, we can do whatever we want. And now we draw the Pentad Prism, so we can go Prism into casting Insight and leaving our mana up, which is really awesome. Really nice draw there for us. Play a Peat Bog, pass the turn. Things are lining up very well. But it's still scary to face a deck that has a combo win. Okay. They Muldrifter. Snap the Muldrifter. Gonna play the Familiar. Play Muldrifter. Snap the Muldrifter again. They play another Familiar. No, they just play the Muldrifter. Okay. So here they're leaving up the counterspell, and they counterspell the serrated arrows, which is nice for me. And we are allowed to now resolve our Inquiry to get poison on our opponent. Then we Thirsting Roots for some proliferation. We can't cast the Vivisurgeon's Insight right now, so I'm going to cast a Deep Analysis. Boop, boop, boop. DA, draw some cards. We draw 2 lands, but it's good that we're still drawing a ton. We've almost drawn as many cards as Familiar's deck. Pretty wild. The Archaeomancer to get back the Prohibit, play a Muldrifter, and they just evoke it, leaving up their mana. So I'm going to Vivisurgeon's Insight because I know that they cannot counter it with the Prohibit. They clearly have Prohibit in hand, but they realize now that they cannot... Well, I know they have Prohibit in hand because of the Archaeomancer, right? So they go for the Prohibit, realize they can't counter it because it's 5 mana, and untap. We draw 3, put them to 3 poison. And we're going to Deep Analysis, cast a Chalice. They counter the Chalice. I was like, okay, that's pretty much fine. We're discarding our black lands. They get in for 4. We might have to weather the storm this game. They preordain. They're going to preordain again. And then Archaeomancer getting back the Prohibit, snapping, playing Familiar, play another Muldrifter, leaving out the Prohibit. We untap. We play Inquiry. They let that resolve. I guess since that would have lethal on board for them. But we have the Weather the Storm. We're going to cast a Prologue. They let that resolve. We cast Contentious Plan. Here it eats the counter. So now we're going to cast the Augury, leaving up 1/1/1 here. We find another Augury. So now we get to cast the Augury again off just the Pentads. And it continues to add mana to our Everflowing Chalice. Augury again. We find Prologue or Thirsting Roots, and now I realize that I'm at the position where I might be able to close the game out, so I take the Thirsting Roots. So after the Thirsting Roots resolves, we will have enough mana to Teachings for the last Augury in the deck, and then hopefully rip the win, and if we don't, we can Weather the Storm. So with Thirsting Roots here, get a bunch of counters on everything. Cast the Teachings, grab the Augury, last one in the deck, cast the Augury, and we end up finding Contentious Plan, Prologue, Scary, so that wins the game. Should have just taken the Prologue because that would win immediately, but I take the Contentious Plan for the proliferation value. Alright, we're proliferating around. Contentious Plan, and that will be GG. Game 1 is over. For Game 2, we're bringing in all 4 Bring the Endings, all 4 Inside Outs. Inside Outs can eat the Familiar for a 2-for-1. Bring the Endings for Archaeomancer, Muldrifter, and also to protect our spells. Then we're taking out 1 Teachings, all 4 Weather Storms, 1 Chalice, and 2 Arrows. Just don't need Weather the Storms against this deck. And here we have a pretty good hand. We've got land drops, we've got some poison, we've got proliferation. We end up ripping the Thirsting Roots, which is really good. That means that we can go turn to Prologue plus Thirsting Roots. And that's my plan here because I want to get them countered up as fast as possible. So they untap, turn 3, play Evoke Muldrifter. So we're going to play out the Chalice, play out the Pentad Prism, and then go ahead and Augury and get a bunch of counters. We find an island. Pass the turn. Okay, we're just going to Thirsting Roots for more. Yeah, play the spells when you can. Get more proliferation. So that means we're going to untap with a ton of mana. If they revoke existence on their turn and we respond by Augurying, they don't have a counterspell when we get the Vivisector's Insight, which is very, very good. We should be able to resolve this. Land, Insight. Okay. Probably should have just tapped the Woodlot there, but who knows. I was trying to save the counters on the Woodlot. Okay, we don't have blue mana to cast our spells, so we're just going to pass. And they have a Familiar in play that is only protected by 1 spell, so we can Inside Out it with Bring the Ending back up. I go for the Inside Out. And they have a Snap, so I bring the Ending to Snap. The Familiar dies, I draw a card. We find an Infectious Inquiry. We don't have black mana right now, although we do have 1 Swamp in hand, obviously. We're going to play 1 Chalice. So pay for Chalice with Chalice. Go ahead and cast Contentious Plan. I decide to lead on the plan because if they counter it, then I'm free to resolve the Inquiry and draw 2. And I think I want the draw more than the proliferation at this point. They counter the Contentious Plan. We can go Inquiry. That resolves. Attempt to cast Contentious Plan. That resolves as well, so they don't have anything they don't have anything in hand. We're going to Deep Analysis and Prologue. Put them to 9. Now any spell will win the game. That resolves, I mean. We tried to play Prism into Deep Analysis. We have 3 cards in hand that can win the game. They have 3 cards in their hand. Unfortunately, I want to try to win this turn, and if they have all 3 counterspells, like negate, prohibit, then we can't win. So we try for Thirsting Roots. They counter that. We're going to Deep Analysis to try to get more cards. Some interaction maybe, or another. And then we find Inquiry, so that means that we just have enough to win the game, because we have 3 spells that counter, and they have 2 cards in hand. 3 spells that give counters, I mean. We cast the Inquiry, where they would have to kick a Prohibit to counter it and tap out completely. And they decide to go for Flicker, get back Flicker, revealing that that's what they had in their hand, and they scoop the game. Alright, that was awesome. We got the 5-0. Took me a while to get these videos together. My original one was trashed on accident, and then recording the replays failed, bugged out on me like 7 times. But I have gotten it for you. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that if you do take this deck to your locals, you'll have a good time. I think it's possible that we want the Breath Weapon in the main over the Serrated Arrows, pulling the Serrated Arrows to the board. and using them mainly for fairies, but I was pretty happy with it. Thanks a lot. I'll see you in the next video.